Today, I'm joined by Elizabeth Lotardo. She is a consultant, writer, and online instructor who helps organizations drive emotional engagement. Her new book, Leading Yourself, has been called a refreshingly candid playbook that helps you create a work experience worth loving right now. She is a popular LinkedIn learning instructor and writes for the Harvard Business Review. Her work has been featured in the Wall Street Journal and on NPR. This is going to be filled with knowledge. So get your note takers ready. And everyone, welcome Elizabeth Lotardo.
Thanks for having me, Dave.
It is great to have you here. I appreciate Aaron Waters connecting us. And we had an offline discussion before this that was quite enjoyable. And I got your book back there on my shelf that has been an enlightening read as I go through it. Something probably would have been very helpful 25 years ago in my career, but
That's a running theme in the feedback I've gotten is I really could have used this a couple of decades ago.
yeah. So but it's here now, right? So and we're gonna dive into a bunch of things, and some things outside of the book that you also do. Uh,
Absolutely. And back to that piece of feedback, I wish I had this 20 years ago. I think so many of us have workplace experiences that fall short of our expectations, and seeing new strategies, talk tracks, tips to reclaim the power that you have inside your job is a career expanding lesson for all of us.
Yeah, absolutely. Because there's so many people out there now that right the popular advice of you have to follow your passion and all of that. Sometimes it's about finding that passion within what you're already doing, not just following a passion.
Right, and most of us did not land in what our five-year-old self would describe as our dream job, and we need to find meaning and joy and opportunities inside of a job that's probably less than perfect, but one you need right now.
Absolutely. All right. So we're gonna get into the show here. If everybody's ready, we're gonna cover three areas today. And those three areas are going to be creating your culture, leading yourself, and love the work. And segment one is the creating the culture. This segment is brought to you by PartsEdge. Your parts department is the backbone of your dealership and is responsible for nearly half of your total profits, according to NADA. Our system works within your DMS for a hybrid approach that combines the precision of automation with the nuanced decision making of parts experts. And so let's start out by defining what culture is for everybody.
So there's a lot of LinkedIn definitions on what organizational culture to me is. To me, the crux of it is the experience of working for your company. And we often think of ourselves as removed from that culture. It's a culture we fall into when in reality, we are shaping that culture. We may not be entirely in control of every element, but the experience of working in your organization is largely determined by you.
That's a great point that we are all doing our little part to shape the culture, and you hear a lot of people talk about there's a bad culture in that business, right? And or in the in the company that I work for, there's a bad culture, and but whenever you ask somebody what is causing the bad culture, very rarely will anybody say, "Well, it's my attitude that
Yeah, right.
that's causing that."
It's all those other people
It's
all the time.
exactly. So if I'm not the leader, right, and leaders make up a very small percentage of any organization. So if you're not the leader, how do you affect culture?
The way you show up to work, how you think and feel about your job, the way you interact with the people around you, what you do, what you don't do at work, That is what defines the culture. And again, we talked about it. So often we pin company culture on a GM, on a senior leader, as if they are the sole person responsible for everyone's emotional tone. When in reality, you have the opportunity to shape your organization's culture no matter the seat you're in. It just takes a little bit more intentionality. Can you 180 working for an asshole? Probably not. But can you make inroads at creating a more meaningful, more joyful experience for yourself and the people around you? Of course.
Yeah, and I think the that statement, like, can you make the 180 if you're working for an asshole? No, right? But I don't think that's often the case, right?
It's
Where most times it's a variant of that, right? It's not that really well defined person who's just impossible to work for.
Yeah, I should have asked if it was okay to curse on your show. I kind of just let that one
Absolutely.
rip. So sorry for your demonetization.
It's all good. Yeah. But your point is well taken. That um, most times you're not going to have that person who you really have to butt heads with to make things better at work, right? There's going to be things that you can do to make it better day to day.
Of course, and it's easy to assume that the people who are usually above us don't care about the work experience. They don't care about the emotional tone of the people that are leading. That is often not the case. You don't know what's in their heart unless they tell you. More often, it is someone who has their boss's foot on their neck. They're hold accountable to a lot of very specific numbers on a weekly or monthly basis. They're under operational pressure to slim things down. And what comes out is all of these demands, all of this pressure. And very well, what may be in their heart is, I do want everyone to have a good work experience. That's just not what they're giving voice to.
Yeah, and that's so I used to always tell my teams in the dealership that I was there to provide cover fire for them from the higher ups so that they could get their work done, right? And as a leader, that's one of the things that you need to be able to convey is, yes, there are pressures from above that you have to get done. But that doesn't mean that you have to do it by just creating that pressure cooker for everybody below you.
So you mentioned at the start of this show, we have a mutual connection, Aaron Waters, who I worked for 10 years ago, and that's something he did exceptionally well. He was a filter instead of a funnel. What
Right.
often happens is a leader, a senior leader, has all of these numbers on their dashboard, all of this pressure from owners, all of this market change and fluctuation that they have to deal with, and they funnel everything down right onto the desk of a service advisor or a
Hmm.
salesperson. The more effective leaders act as a filter. They filter out everything that's not really in control of that individual person, and they allow that individual person to own their part and control the controllable. Having said that, a lot of us work for leaders who are funnels. Still, we're not powerless. Through leading up, you can extrapolate out what really matters to you in your role and remove yourself from some of that pressure your leader may be under.
I love that analogy there that you made of being a filter rather than a funnel. And we often say that we don't want to be the small end of the funnel to impede progress. But when it comes to leadership, that's a great picture that you just painted there of somebody who's filtering out the nonsense, if you will, and not just funneling it down to those below them. How if you don't have authority, how is it that one would go about leading, as your book says, leading yourself?
So, if you don't have authority, if you're an individual contributor, you can still make inroads at creating a work experience worth loving. The challenge is to focus your mind on what is controllable instead of sitting with what isn't controllable.
Mm.
It is easy to understand and harder to execute. our mind pulls us to all these things that are outside of our control. What is our GM doing? What is this customer going to think about me? What is the market doing? What is the future of AI going to impact my role? And am I going to be replaced by a robot one day? All of those things are outside of your control. Would you shift your mind to what's in your control? How am I going to show up to work today? What do I think about my job? What do I believe? How do I put myself forth to customers? If you're in a customer facing role, that's where we start to feel empowered. And we know that those small changes, again, may not make a 180 transformation of a job that's not your dream job, but they can start to make it better. And the most important element of that is you want to feel powerful, because you are. When we focus on everything that's outside of our control, we feel like a cog in a money machine, and no one wants to feel that way.
Yeah, and that's the, you can transfer that to outside of your work life too, right? If you want to go about your day thinking about only the things that you don't have any control over, you know, the guy in front of you who's driving 30 miles an hour when you have somewhere to be, you can get all upset about that, or realize you have no control over that person that's driving the car, and go with it.
Yeah,
Um,
it's petrifying yet freeing to realize that there is so much outside of your control.
Yes, absolutely. And so the point of that being that you don't need to actually be in control to have a job that you can find fulfilling, even if it isn't your dream job. I don't know how many people in the world are actually working in what their dream job is.
Yeah, well, LinkedIn would have you believe a disproportionate number of people are in their dream job when that's really not the case. I'm sure a lot of you listening or watching have seen that graphic where what you're good at comes together with what the world needs, which comes together with what you're paid for, and it all looks so perfect, right? But no one's center point is client advisor or service advisor. Like we're not living that center point. And when social media is filled with graphics like that, it's easy to think if you're in a job that isn't your dream job, you're failing in some way.
Hmm.
But if you are in that job, you're providing a living for your family, you're making a difference, the tasks you do matter. And if you have a job, they probably do. Otherwise, no one would be paying you.
Right.
That is meaning enough. And we have to divorce ourselves from this belief that work should fill every part of our emotional cup, that it should be this magical daily experience, because oftentimes it isn't. But that
Hmm.
doesn't mean it can't be good.
Right. Right. And that's, I think that's a really important point, that you can't look at your daily work or job as something that is going to completely fill your cup, every single day and every single moment of every single day. Um, the I don't know how you pronounce it, but the icky guy
Yeah,
that you
I
just
stayed away
described.
from even attempting, as you correctly picked up on.
So I gave it a shot, but I can tell you, if I filled that thing out and filled in all those boxes, I think that center point is probably going to come out to something like ice cream eater, and I'm probably not getting paid much for that. So, but you're absolutely right. It's nice, it's beautiful to look at, and it would be magical if you could get to that center point and do exactly what it says. But the reality is, life is messy. It's not perfect concentric circles that all overlap, that take you to a beautiful center point where everything is lovely.
Having said that, you can still make a purpose driven work experience inside of a normal job. You just need to be
Yes.
able to tap into your ripple effect, the impact that all your conversations and your actions have on the people around you, have on your customers,
Yeah.
and really tether yourself to that sense of meaning. You don't have
Mhm.
to be curing cancer, saving the environment. Those are huge things. You can simply be helping someone have a better day, helping someone sleep at night because they know their car's going to start the next morning.
Right.
Those seemingly mundane bits of making the world go round are actually what fill us with a sense of purpose, not some concentric circle graphic that maybe 1% of the population is actually living.
Yeah. Absolutely. And so as we move into segment two, which is leading yourself, which is also the title of your book, um, talk to me about imperfect bosses, and what do you do if your boss sets some unrealistic goals for you as you're trying to have a fulfilling work experience?
Well, if you're working for a human, you're working for an imperfect boss because we are all imperfect beings. And in the research for leading yourself, one of the common blockers for happiness at work is a boss who sets an unrealistic goal for you. And usually that goal is unrealistic because it's dependent upon outside factors that you can't control. And when we can't control, it gives us that really scary feeling. It makes us feel like there's nothing I can do. This is all swirling. I'm not going to hit this. I don't know how to hit this. And if you're in a conversation about that with your boss, what you want to do from your seat, you're not going to change them, is extrapolate out your input. So if your output, let's just say a revenue target, this is a common scenario in the automotive business is a revenue target, you want to extrapolate out all of the elements that are within your control. You don't control the market, you don't control the economy, you don't control the product in a lot of cases. What you do control is your outbound calls. You do control how quickly you follow up with customers. You do control your own attitude and how you show up in the morning. So, identifying all these elements that you can control, sharing those with your manager, that's going to give you something to actually work towards instead of crossing your fingers that you hit this insane target. And the sub benefit of extrapolating out what is in your control and aligning on that with your manager is if you don't hit this target, which is likely the case if it truly is unrealistic,
Mhm.
your manager is going to see that you did your part. This is playing a little bit of corporate chess because what you're able to do is say, not my fault without saying not my fault, right? Because we
Right.
don't want to be deflecting. You're saying these are all the inputs I did. You and I agreed that these things would drastically increase the likelihood that I hit my goal. If there's some external factor, your performance isn't deemed as a total failure because you did your part.
Mhm. I love that, and it happens often in automotive where there's just a blanket. We need a 30% improvement over last year, and nothing is looked at. I used to always joke that you'd work at a place that they wanted a forecast for next year, but really what they wanted was a guess because you could create that forecast and say, you want a 30% increase. Here's what we need to do. We need to add three technicians. We need to add two services. Well, we can't have it. We can't increase expenses. So you've got to get that 30% increase with exactly what you have right now, which sometimes you can do that with efficiencies, but most times it was an ask that that was unrealistic. Um, tell me more about how somebody can kind of discern what is within their control and what is not within their control.
What you can do is ask yourself, does this depend on other people or other factors? We don't want to be making on their behalf promises like, I'm going to get all this stuff done, provided so and so does their part of it too, because that sets us up for failure if so and so doesn't actually deliver.
Mhm,
You want to be conscious of external factors. These are things like the economy, the market, what's going on politically, really important now.
mhm,
So you want to, as much as possible, extrapolate what is completely within your control and point yourself towards that because only then are you going to feel energy and achievement when you actually accomplish it. If you tether yourself to some insane number that depends on a million other factors, if you achieve it, you're going to feel lucky because you know so much was at stake. And if you don't achieve it, even if you do all your inputs and you tried everything you could, you're going to feel terrible because you've tethered yourself to something that is dependent on so many other things.
mhm,
And exceptional leaders do this for their team naturally. They extrapolate out what is your core responsibility.
mhm.
Some leaders pass down these insane targets, and it's up to you, the individual, to extrapolate out what you can control and have that conversation with your leader. That's leading yourself. And in this case, is leading up.
I love that. I love that. And so how does that individual prioritize when everything may feel important either to them or to their boss?
So oftentimes what happens in a corporate environment or in a dealership environment is the loudest voice gets the top priority seat. And that is not always for the best. The customer who is screaming the most, the manager who is the most aggressive at following up, they're the ones who are going to get the attention.
Yeah.
As an individual, when you're taking that strategic view on prioritizing your stuff, you're going to look through the lens of impact. not who is the loudest, but what is going to make the biggest difference in my goals professionally and my goals that my boss has handed to me and whatever you're working towards. What's going to make the biggest difference in achieving that? And oftentimes, it's not the loudest voice in the room. The
Yeah.
loudest voice is seemingly the most urgent. I'm sure everyone has seen that diagram of like urgent versus important, and we
Mhm.
neglect all of the things that are seemingly not urgent but crucially important to our own happiness and our own development. You want to be proactive in pointing your mind there, even if it means not ignoring, but deprioritizing the loudest voice. Easier said than done, right? I'm sitting here on
Right.
a podcast. I'm not the one who has to tell a really barky manager that they need to wait. But the more you can do this a little bit, the more you can respectfully push back on some of that false urgency that is so often generated in these environments, the happier and more successful you'll be at work.
Yeah, that's terrific advice there. And this doesn't help anybody, but my son said to me one time, we were talking about something along this lines, and I said, well, the squeaky wheel gets the grease, right? That loudest person, and he astutely said back to me, or it gets taken off and gets replaced with a wheel that doesn't squeak.
Yeah,
And
a wise son.
so it does it's not going to help anybody with dealing with a boss who's squeaky, but it's I like the perspective of that.
Well, in the pull through thread through these topics we've talked about through goal setting, through prioritizing, through conversations with your boss, is controlling the controllable. You are looking at this sometimes frustrating situation and saying, what's my part? What can I do? How can I maneuver this in a way that works
Mhm.
for me instead of lamenting in all of these external factors, which may or may not change?
Yeah, but because that's where that's the stress, right? That comes, and like we all need a little bit of tension in our life, right? You need some tension to keep you moving in one direction or another, but you don't need an overexertion of tension causing stress, and that stress comes from you trying to change something or control something that you is uncontrollable to you.
Or even just lamenting about it, like, trying to control implies some type of action. I'm sure I'm not the only one guilty of venting to my spouse about all the woes I experienced at work that day. The challenge in doing that is, sometimes you might need to let it out, but you
Mhm.
give even more of your brain space, even more of your time to all these elements that are already frustrating you. When you shift your
Right.
mindset to, "What can I control? How can I maneuver this? What part am I playing?"
Mhm.
You move from emotional resentment into tactical maneuvering. And that's when your work experience really starts to change.
Yeah, I love that, and I'll tell you how in my household how we reframed that, coming home and complaining about something that or things that happened at work during the day, is we changed it into a lot of people have a gratefulness practice, right? But so what we do is you have to find three specific things that you are grateful for during your day, and so rather than coming home and complaining about some things. Uh, we talk about three specific things that we were grateful for in the day, and it changes because some people have a gratefulness practice, and it's I'm grateful that the sun is out today, I'm grateful that whatever, it's the same themes over and over again, and when you change it to you have to have three specific things that happen to you during your day to be grateful for, um, makes it a little easier, makes you look for those things during your day, rather than to try and control the uncontrollables.
And if you're sitting here listening to us being like, I don't want to make a gratitude practice, I just want validation that all of this is unfair, you will certainly find validation that all of this is unfair. Some of it may be unfair. You may have a leader that's not great. You may have a job that's too overwhelming. There
Mhm.
may be elements of your work experience that aren't good. And
Yeah.
that's a reality. But when you push away things like gratitude, when you push away owning your part, when you push away the belief that it could be better if you tried, you're the only one paying the price for that. You're the
Yes.
one that's not having a good time at work, and you have the power to change it if you step into it.
Yeah. It's from the 12 step programs, of one that I belong to. It's taking the poison and hoping that somebody else suffers the consequences for it.
And we're all guilty of it. I'm not gonna sit up here on a high horse and say, I wrote the book Leading Yourself, I still complain about my day sometimes. We're going for progress, not perfection. This is
Yes.
not an entire 180. It's small shifts towards ownership, towards gratitude, towards finding the meaning in the sometimes mundane that ultimately create a heart shift in the way you feel about work.
Yeah. So the last question in this section, in the automotive industry, there's typically a lot of turnover. And so for a service advisor or a salesperson, a new service manager, a new general manager coming in typically has a different way of doing things and they want to change things up. And maybe that advisor has been there for 5 months or 5 years. How do they keep from going insane when those new people come in?
Well, the first is to understand the intent. And I say this from somewhat of a place of knowledge. My husband is a sales manager in the automotive industry, and our household has witnessed many changes in terms of leadership, both above and below that position. The first step is to see their intent. Very rarely is someone walking in with changes, with new ideas, with a different way of doing things, with the sole aim of making your job harder. That may be what it feels like because there's
Hmm.
more work for you, there's different things to do, there's all this new stuff to learn. But
Sure.
when you see the intent that they want the organization as a whole to be successful, they want the business to grow, that enables you to do a little bit less of an eye roll when new work does land inevitably on your desk. Another thing you can force yourself to do is to ask questions. So instead of yay or nay, this new idea, this new change, whatever it is, you want to seek to understand the reason behind that. And there's a couple of really important benefits that happen for both you and this new leader when you seek to understand the meaning behind their new ideas. First, if the idea actually sucks, it will be revealed when you're asking questions. When you say, why do you want to do that? What impact do you think it will have on this or that? Again, from a genuine place of curiosity, if there's not a lot of meat there, the leader will see that before they force an execution. A good leader will at least.
Hmm.
The second benefit is you can add to this idea. When you understand the full context, coupled with the knowledge that you have over years in your industry, years with your organization, you can build on this in a way that this new leader may not be able to. And that's of huge value to your company and of huge value to you because instead of being a pawn that says, yes, we will do this change, you are someone who, no matter your role, is shaping it, who's contributing to it in an important way. So the more you push to understand the context, the more you ask questions, the more you validate their good intent, the more easily that change is going to come to fruition for both you and for your leader, and the better you're going to look in the process.
Yeah, that's a great outlook on it. And I was having a conversation the other day about coaching people, and we were talking about how as a coach you need to be eternally curious and always asking those questions. And if you approached the new tasks that are being given you in the same way, as opposed to just saying they're just trying to give me more work, you would probably find some better meaning there. But because you're right, they're not coming in just trying to make somebody else's job difficult.
Right. It's easy to feel like they are, especially when leaders don't explain the context of a change. They don't explain the end goal of it, which is often the case in a rushed business where lots of things are happening concurrently. But
Right.
you can take the ownership of seeking to understand and asking questions to make sure you do get that full picture. You're
Hmm.
going to find opportunities to contribute in new ways. And if you don't find them, you're at least going to be a little bit less grumbly because you know there's an end in sight beyond more things for you to do.
Right, right. And I think a lot of times you're right in speaking from automotive, like that new GM or that new service manager comes in and they come in and they already have marching orders, right? They've already been told, like, they're not coming in because everything is going great, right? And unless it happens to be that somebody who is retiring or something and that's the reason for the change. That's typically not the case. And so they're being brought there because ownership or upper management is looking for a change, and they're coming in and probably incorrectly most times assuming that everybody else understands exactly what they understand.
Right.
And that's why that creates that stress, right? When they start doling out these new responsibilities and they don't put the explanation behind it because they assume that everybody else understands it also.
And as an individual, when you greet that with immediate pushback, it's not only not a good look for you, just pro
Hmm.
tip in terms of your reputation,
Yep.
it's also going to feel terrible. You're going to go home at night feeling like you're powerless, like now you have even more stuff to do. Versus with a couple of questions, you and your leader are going to feel better together. And you'll see,
Hmm.
even if there's more work, there's an end state and there's benefit to this.
Yeah, and I can tell you from personal experience, I had to learn to ask those questions and not just give that pushback. Like I was lucky enough to be able to see sometimes things that were not going to work, but rather than asking questions to reveal that, I would push back on it, right? And you end up being the person who is looked at as a negative person as
Even if
opposed
you're
to
right.
somebody, yeah, instead of somebody who's out there seeking solutions.
Yeah, and even if you're right, even if this idea isn't
Yes.
good, even if it won't work, even if that is gonna make tons of problems down the road that this person doesn't see, if you immediately push back, you still
Yes.
look bad. They're never
Yes.
gonna be like, "Oh, you were right all along, you're a genius." You have to do a little bit of politicking inside your organization and
Mhm.
lead with questions, seek to understand. There very well could be something you don't know.
Yes. Absolutely. As a younger person, and I've been asked the question before, like if you could go back to your 20-year-old self, whatever, and what would you tell them? And I always say I wouldn't tell them anything because I wouldn't have listened to you back then. Right.
Same.
So it doesn't matter what I would have gone back and told myself.
Yeah, I would have said I was wrong.
So segment three is called Love the Work. And this is where we're all trying to get to. This segment is brought to you by Automotive Warranty Network Incorporated, family owned and operated claims management service based out of Denver, Colorado. They currently process more than 100 million in warranty per month. The job is not the job that I thought I would have, right? But how do we make the most out of that when it's not our dream job? Because as we said earlier, most people are not in their dream job.
Human beings want two fundamental things: belonging and significance. We want to be part of something that is greater than ourselves, and we want to know that our contribution matters. So, how can you make that for yourself from the seat of an individual contributor? First, you're going to really focus on building relationships inside of your organization. I'm not saying you have to be like BFF with these people, you don't have to see them outside of work, but the more you can lean into developing camaraderie, to aligning on a shared purpose, not to complaining about the work the whole time, even though that's tempting to do, the more you can come together in pursuit of a shared goal, the
Hmm.
better you're all going to feel at work. The second element is significance. We want to know that we're doing something important, that our part matters. And to tap into that for yourself, you want to trace your ripple effect. And sometimes this can be mentally awkward to do, but bear with me. If you are a service advisor, for example, and you talk with someone about a long list of repairs that need to be done to their vehicle, what is the ripple effect of that if you do it well? They feel confident knowing that they are doing everything they need to do to ensure reliable and safe transportation for them and their family. They feel heard and understood because you didn't rush them through it. You explained things. They don't leave feeling
Right.
like an idiot who got conned out of thousands of dollars. They feel like they have a partner, someone they can talk to. They feel like when they go home at night and their spouse says, "Did you get it taken care of?" And they say, "Yes, I did." That's a bit of confidence. So, again, there's some mental awkwardness that we have to push through. But when you do push through that, you see that these seemingly everyday interactions that you do sometimes just on autopilot
Yeah.
actually have a profound impact on the way people feel about themselves, on the way they feel about their transportation, and in the way they experience their lives. Because if this wasn't happening, what you're doing on a daily basis, whether it's advising customers from a service perspective, whether it's helping someone find the right car, whether it's leading a dealership to create a better customer experience as a whole, if that wasn't happening, there would be a hole. It's easy to see when it doesn't happen, and it's easy to take it for granted when it does happen. We have to push ourselves to really latch on to that meaning and that purpose, even in seemingly mundane moments, to fill our cup at work.
Yeah, that's such a powerful viewpoint, but because take somebody who is, you talking about curing cancer before, right? You're saying, right? So, but somebody who's doing cancer research is also doing some of the same things day in and day out, right?
Yeah.
That job can seem mundane to them,
Yeah,
right? But
someone
they,
is sweeping the floor of the cancer lab, but
yes,
that job is really important because if it's really contaminated and bad, we're never
yes,
gonna find a cure.
yeah,
So, whether you're sweeping the floor of a cancer lab, whether you're helping someone sleep at night knowing that their Subaru is gonna last another few years, it matters, and when you connect yourself to why it matters, you feel a lot better at work.
yeah, absolutely, and that's something that I tried to convey to all the service advisors, was that and not just the service advisors, to everybody within the dealership, under my scope of leadership, was that we do have a purpose here, and we are helping people, and whether that is helping the car get fixed so that that person can then get themselves to work to provide for a family, who maybe it's to get their kids into soccer or whatever it is. Maybe it's to take their mom to a cancer treatment, right? You don't know what those ripples are when you start them.
That's absolutely the case. And again, when we do these things every day, like your example of the lab, it's easy to lose sight of how significant they are. But your thousands of customers, it's only their one interaction, the one time they're getting their car
Yes.
service that year, the one time they're worried and they're anxious and they don't know how much it's going to be, or if they should do it, or if they should not, or if it's worth it. That's the one moment for them. You may have hundreds of them through the
Hmm.
week, but it's their only.
Exactly, exactly. And I feel like we've probably covered a lot of this, but what is a purpose driven work experience?
A purpose driven work experience is knowing that your work matters. It's not joining the Peace Corps or being a firefighter or curing cancer. It's knowing that the stuff you do every day is making a difference to somebody else. That's what fills us with meaning and with joy, not this grandiose, concentric circle diagram we referenced earlier. And that feeling of meaning and joy is quite possible inside normal jobs. We just have to do a little bit of mental work to get there.
I love that. Uh, Elizabeth, 3 steps someone can take today to move toward leading themselves better.
So, the first, what we just talked about, find the meaning in your work. That's going to give you energy. It's going to give you purpose to get through some of that hard stuff. Second, look for opportunities for connection. They are not going to find you. You have to find them. You have to look for moments where you can sync up better with your boss, where you can connect with your colleagues, where you can share an experience, where you can lean into a customer more empathetically. You have to seek them out because otherwise you will not find them. And lastly, widen the lens on your next play. So often we think about my next play is going to be a senior version of my current junior role, or my next play
Yeah,
is going to be this quite linear trajectory. But when you
sure.
widen the lens and you really take leading yourself to heart, you may expand your thinking into different industries, into a different role inside your organization that isn't like the linear step. Really think about the trajectory of your life and know that there is more possible for you than one promotion.
Yeah, that's great. And within the automotive world and the dealership world, that path for you does not have to be linear at all. There are so many different roles and things that you could do within the dealership, that you can start out in one department, end up, in a leadership role in another department, or in another store. If you're working in a group, it may not even be in the same brand or anything. There's a lot of different paths for people to take.
Yeah, don't sell yourself short. Your current reality is not your end destination, and you have the opportunity to lead yourself in any direction you choose, even if that takes a little bit of time.
Excellent. Elizabeth Lotardo, consultant, writer, online instructor, author of the new book, Leading Yourself. Thank you for spending some time with us today.
Thanks for having me.